Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, I'd like to get everyone a little bit warmed up, because it's a little bit chilly in here. So if everybody could please just stand up. Come on, everybody. This is going to be good for you, I promise. It's good for your aging. Now, hands in the air. Come on, everyone. Now, wave them around like you just don't care. OK, now clap. Clap, clap, clap. Faster, 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 faster. Come on, you can do this. Come on, everybody. Fantastic. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, I got a standing ovation and I haven't even started. Well, let me get started. So once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pete Ward. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Humanity. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about death or life and death. Let's see. But let me start by asking you guys a question. How many of you are scared of dying? Raise your hands. OK. Less than half. OK. So everyone who said that, those who actually didn't respond, I want you to be honest with yourselves. How many of you would be scared if you found out you had 1 month left to live? Ah, so you are scared of dying. OK. And if those of you still didn't put up your hands, how many of you would be a little bit upset if you found out that maybe your folks, your mum or your dad or your loved ones were going to die very soon? Would that make you sad? OK. The rest of you, you're not human. I don't know you anymore. But no, in all seriousness, death is scary. And a lot of us don't like to talk about it because we're fearful of it. And so ignorance is bliss. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my personal story, which I'm sure will resonate with some of you. So my mum, and death has been ever present for me. So my mum she lost her sister at childbirth, had rheumatic fever at 7, almost died. And then when I was 4, she had a nervous breakdown. And then has suffered mental illness for the rest of her life. So as an only child, growing up with that, I would see my mum going really low and depressive and suicidal on the one moment and being sectioned in hospital for weeks upon end. And on other occasions, she would go high and manic and would trash the house and would shout the rooftops at 4 a.m., waking up the neighbors. So that was my first sort of like trauma linked to losing health, mental health. When I was 27, my dad had a severe stroke, and it left him completely disabled and debilitated. He had to move into a nursing home because my mum couldn't cope. There weren't services like Birdie around to help provide a high quality of care to help him live a healthier life for longer. But again, he died 6 years after the stroke. And by the way, he had a stroke on the day of my grandfather's funeral. So my mum lost her dad and her husband in one fell swoop. My wife, she lost her dad to a heart attack when he was 48. He was playing basketball and he just collapsed. And unfortunately, her mum passed away when we were pregnant with our first child. So my first child never got to meet her grandma. So we're both orphans. And our kids will never get to meet their grandparents properly. But this is not unique to me. I'm sure many of you have experienced some form of loss to sickness, poor health, death, whether it be close family or close friends. And many of us feel helpless when this happens to us. People die, all the time. And maybe they had a genetic predisposition to that. And so, it's something we can't control. But I don't know if, like me, you felt that this is something that we shouldn't feel so helpless about and that we should take some control. And so the question I want to ask, first of all, is is it possible to affect your health span, your lifespan? Is it possible to keep our loved ones healthy for longer so they can be fully functional and spend that time with their grandkids and loved ones? Well, let's look at the science. So all the way back to ancient times, people were trying to cure aging. You can go back to 350 BC when Aristotle himself posited that we age because of a lack of moisture. So I don't encourage you all to go for a run and get sweaty right now, because that's, by the way, not the solution. But ever since then, people were so fascinated with this elixir of life. But it wasn't until 1993 when a scientist named Cynthia Kenyon and her team actually, for the first time, extended the lifespan of an organism. It was a nematode, so not quite human, but these C. elegans, and this particular study, they were able to double the lifespan. So this was a huge breakthrough. It's technically possible. And so began this new field of aging science that we now see ourselves in. If you then fast forward a few more years, in 2003, there was a guy called Andrei Bartek, who essentially showed that we could extend the lifespan of a mouse to 5 years. Now, you guys are thinking, 5 years, that's not long. But most mice live 2 to 3 years. So it's the equivalent of extending a mammal, we're a mammal, to 180 years. There was a lot of stuff happening in the space, and so a leading journal called Cell published this sort of landmark story on the hallmarks of aging. In other words, there was a lot of scientists working on different parts of the aging process, and so they discovered there were these 8 or 9 hallmarks, and so began even more research into these different causes of aging. And whilst all this was happening, there were different clinical trials and studies happening where we were trying to identify health interventions or pharmacological agents that can affect the aging process. The first was something called metformin that was found in 1997 to actually extend the lifespan of mice. Then a couple of years later, another compound called rapamycin was found to do the same by affecting the signaling pathways of mTOR. So as you can imagine, once these discoveries were happening, there was just more and more interest in what affects aging and what could affect our aging. But if you bring it right up to the last couple of years, we've seen an absolute exponential explosion in both the breakthroughs of science, technological advancements, and validation that aging can not only be slowed, it can be reversed, or as the cool kids call it, reprogrammed. In 2019, there was the first randomized controlled trial where we could actually see, using these biological clocks. Essentially, a biological clock is looking at how old you are biologically rather than chronologically since you were born. And they could found by just doing a 2-month intervention combination therapy, which included a combination of phytonutrients, probiotics, exercise, relaxation, and good sleep, it could vastly impact the health span and lifespan of healthy humans. And even just this year, a very well-known scientist called David Sinclair, Dr. David Sinclair, he just published a paper in Cell which showed that we're not actually most impacted in our aging by our genes that we're born with. It's the epigenetics, the expression of our genes, which genes turn on or off as a function of our environment or through gene therapy, that has a much bigger impact on how mammals age. Confirming what a lot of scientists and researchers and innovators had thought for many years, that it's in our control. So the question here is, what does this mean for all of us? Okay? How do we take advantage of this new science and breakthrough technology? Are we going to start injecting ourselves with gene therapies? Probably not just yet. There are a bunch of things that we can do right now to have a huge impact. So I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think is the #1 thing that you can do to slow or reverse your aging? Anybody? Over here. Healthy food. That's a good one. Definitely has a positive impact. Over here. Sleep. Yeah, wearing my Oura ring just in case. Last one, maybe? Okay. Well, interestingly, and this is not my answer, by the way, the one that the largest longitudinal study on this subject has shown, which is the Harvard study, is that the biggest impact, and they did 2 cohorts, one which went to Ivy League, one that went to community college, expecting to see lifestyle factors having the biggest part to play. The single biggest impact was the quality and quantity of your social connections. Loneliness had the biggest impact. But if you ask me what the biggest thing is, it's to monitor yourself. Because if you don't monitor yourself, if you don't understand your own biomarkers, then you don't really know what works for you. Now, a bunch of really clever data scientists managed to get hold of these longitudinal data sets from the UK Biobank, NHANES, and discovered that you can actually monitor your aging and predict your risk of disease and death just from your smartphone. Did you know that you have a powerful sensor in your pockets called an accelerometer? And we can look at the movement patterns second by second. And if you have a wearable, we can look at the heart rate patterns second by second. And we can compare that to the real-world outcomes of people who 10, 20 years later got sick, got cardiovascular disease, got dementia, had a heart attack, died. And we can compare you to those participants and give you a feedback loop to tell you whether you're getting healthier or not. So the power's in your hands, or perhaps even in your pockets. But there's plenty more that we can do. There's so much disparities between men and women, between different age groups, between different weight categories. You know, you'll be hearing later from a great entrepreneur, Helene, who has set up a company called Wild AI, which is looking at female health, reproductive health, female health, human performance, and the differences in biomarkers are completely different. I'm on a mission to give 1 billion years of health back to humanity by the end of this decade. David Sinclair and a bunch of smart economists came out with the seminal paper that calculated that if we can give a year of health back to society, it's worth $38 trillion. And over 10 years, that's $368 trillion. So there's a huge longevity dividend if we can actually make an impact in this space. And so that's what led me and my co-founder, my amazing co-founder, Michael Gear, to set up Humanity. So what does Humanity do? First, it monitors your rate of aging and biological age. And 2, it guides you to slow it down. Think of it like a Waze, the traffic app, for your health. So like Waze, it knows where you are on your journey, and based on other people who took a similar journey before you, it guides you to the most optimal route. Take the second right, you'll get there in 17 minutes. Well, why don't we have that for health? We've relied on the gold standard of double-blind, placebo clinical trials, where we essentially have one variant and we assume all the other variants are the same, as if we're all like androids and we actually don't have any differences in our other areas apart from this one thing. So why is it when they try to repeat a trial, even on something as obvious as high-intensity interval training, it works for 70% of the people? Well, what about the other 30%? What if it makes them less healthier? What if it gives them an increased risk of a heart attack? You know, so everyone is different. And that is why the #1 thing you can do is to monitor yourself. And that's what Humanity is hoping to be able to do. The biggest thing we've found so far with 150,000 users and billions of health data points is that when you look at the multivariate analysis across different age groups, genders, obviously there's 2 genders, but very many different choices of genders, and then you have the weight categories, the difference in age, the different in aging impact from every intervention is completely different. So what you're being told, this is good for you, this is bad for you, is fundamentally wrong. So we need a new system to know what's working, and we need to know if it's working for us. Because there's only two things that everyone wants to know. What is it I should do to be healthier, and is it working? So now we know that it's technically possible. Again, I'd like to ask you guys, what would you do if you had an extra 20 years of life and health span? Or even 40 or 50 years of health and lifespan? We're looking at, in the scientific world, reversing menopause. Removing senolytic or non-functional cells from the body, which cause inflammation. Growing organoids, where we can replace organs or rejuvenate our organs and rejuvenate our skin and our health. So what would you guys do, philosophically speaking, if you had an extra 40, 50 years? Would you have another child at 50? Would you change your career at 65? Maybe you'll, go traveling at 90 and do some, surfing. So I'd like you guys to think about that. And I'd like to conclude with a call to arms, if you will, or a choice. Because we all have a choice, okay? The first choice is we can just do nothing, carry on as we are. We're going to die when we're going to die. Let's just have some fun and, bury our head in the sand, because death is like this scary thing. We don't want to think about it. And, our time is when our time is. And that's okay, if that's you. But I'd like to consider the possibility that you do the other thing, which is what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to encourage many, many millions more to do, and that is to take control of your health and to actually understand what's working for you so that you can live a healthier life for longer and be around to play a game of basketball with your grandkids or great-grandkids. And by the way, it doesn't put a burden on the planet more so than you think by increasing the health span of everybody on this planet. Because birth rates are coming down, and it doesn't affect the mathematics on how many people are on this planet from a birth rate point of view. And if we're healthy, rather than keeping us alive as we're sick, then we can contribute to society. Remember that longevity dividend I'm talking about. So I'll finish with a quote, my favorite quote from Interstellar, where the AI robot is telling Matthew McConaughey, "It's impossible." And Matthew McConaughey says, "No, it's necessary. It's necessary that we take control of our health, if you ask me." And as Ewan McGregor would say in Trainspotting, choose life. Thank you.